Good evening, Lake Forest, and welcome to the September 4th, 2018 session of the Lake Forest City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Certainly. Honorable Mayor Lansing.
Here.
Alderman Beidler.
Here.
Alderman Morris.
Here.
Alderman Newman.
Here.
Alderman Rummel.
Here.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Here.
Alderman Preschlack.
Here.
Alderman Moreno.
Here.
Alderman Bushman.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. First item of business, reports. Oh, the second. Will you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, to reports of city officers and first comments by the mayor. The first of which is a resolution of appreciation for Public Works Refuse Collector Robert Wolf. Whereas Robert W. Wolf has been a dedicated employee of the city of Lake Forest since June the 3rd, 2002, as maintenance worker, refuse collector, and whereas Robert W. Wolf will honorably retire from the city on September the 6th, 2018, and whereas Robert W. Wolf has used his 41 years of knowledge in the sanitation field to educate and help keep his fellow employees safe from the many different hazards of refuse collection, and whereas Robert W. Wolf on multiple occasions has come to the aid of residents that he found in need of emergency medical attention, and whereas Robert W. Wolf could always be counted on to serve the residents with a smile while en route or managing the compost and recycling center, and whereas Robert W. Wolf has been a dependable and dedicated employee who took great pride and care in the service that he provided to the residents, the quantity of work he contributed, and the exceptional care of equipment to which he was assigned. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Lake Forest that the council, on behalf of the administration and residents of the community, hereby expresses its appreciation and gratitude to Robert W. Wolf for a public service faithfully performed. And be it further resolved that this resolution be appropriately inscribed and conveyed to Bob, with a copy to be included in the official minutes of the September 4th, 2018 meeting of the Lake Forest City Council. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Bob Wolf, step forward.
I know the staff's all saying, you clean up pretty nice.
Thank you very much. No. Public speaking isn't my forte, so I'll do the best I can. But I just want to thank everybody on staff here, Mr. Kiley, Mike, my supervisor, Brian Bagachik, who was a field worker with me and has moved up to supervisor, and he's earned all the respect of his workers, and I think we do a pretty good job. And lastly, I want to thank all the residents of Lake Forest, because you are the people we work for, and we appreciate all you and all the cold water you give us in the summer and the hot cocoa in the winter, and you're very thoughtful people. So thank you for letting me work for the city. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Bob
it.
Wolf. I can't resist. It just shows you, even at the end of the parade, Lake Forest has really good people cleaning up after us. Second, I'd like to make two board and commission appointments, reappointments by the mayor. One is Stephen Douglas to the Plan Commission, and the other is James Moorhead to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Is there a motion to approve these appointments?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next is mayoral appointments of the Comprehensive Plan Working Group for the Waukegan Road Settler Square Business District, which is the first chapter of the Comprehensive Plan update to be taken up by the city through the Community Development Department. This working group will be tasked with envisioning and planning the future of the Waukegan and Everett Roads area, an area that is largely a commercial district. The group will be advisory to city staff as a draft update to the Waukegan Road Business District section of the comprehensive plan is prepared, and will take part in analyzing data, listening to community input, and input from those with expertise in particular areas, participating in work sessions, exploring new opportunities, understanding realities and limitations, and balance various interests. The culmination of this information flow is a formal public hearing process at which the proposed amendments will be considered by the Plan Commission as directed by the City Code. The City Council will then receive the Plan Commission's recommendations and vote thereon. Please keep in mind that in addition to the working groups for the comprehensive plan update that will proceed over the next 18 months, there will be multiple opportunities open to all interested parties to participate in workshops, discussions, walking tours, surveys, and ultimately the public hearings as the various topic areas in the comprehensive plan are discussed. There will be 9 members of this working group selected after careful consideration on my part, particularly with regard to what individual nominees will bring to the group, such as expertise related to the task at hand, knowledge of the Waukegan Everett Roads area, as well as the broader community, and relevant background and experience. As for the appointments themselves, one, a representative of the local business community, John Cortese of Sunset Foods. 2 real estate or business at large representatives, Jack Frigo and Bob Shaw. And then 4 residents of the surrounding planning area, Eileen Luby, Randy Daniels, Richard Sugar, and Dennis Muhlmans. There will also be 1 plan commissioner, a representative from the Plan Commission to act as liaison, and Stephen Douglas will be that person who is highly experienced in retail and commercial real estate. And then last, a former elected and appointed city official, Mike Edelman, who has been an alderman, member of the Plan Commission, a member of the city's zoning board of appeals, a Fourth Ward resident, a developer, and an attorney, and Mike will also serve as chair of this working group. Those are mayor's appointments for this evening. Two more items. One, I just want to relate to citizens that work continues on my and other folks' parts with the village president of Glenview, Jim Patterson, engaging with the senior leadership of IDOT and of Metra on they're not moving forward with a third main track. More meetings are anticipated this month, and it is hoped there will be news to report sooner than later. As of today, the environmental assessment report has not been released. And then last, the City Council workshop previously scheduled for September 17th will be held that evening, but will be devoted to a thorough discussion of several capital projects facing Lake Forest that pose difficult choices for fiscal planning. Mother Nature in recent months has brought forward these budget prioritization discussions, and we need to spend plenty of time on that at the workshop on the 17th. With that, comments by the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This evening, we're pleased to have our community spotlight be on Elua Farms, which is certainly a treasure, not just in the Third Ward, but in the entire community. And to speak with us this evening about what's going on at Elua Farms is the Elua Foundation Chair, Diana Fitzsimons. Diane?
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for the opportunity for me to speak on behalf of the Elua Farm Foundation on what is going on at Elua Farm. We're very proud of how things are going, and I'm happy to be able to share, although you have a big agenda, so I'll try to share quickly. As you can see, the Elua Farm Foundation remains, or the foundation mission remains, that the Elua Farm, a restored gentleman's farm and garden, enriches our community as a unique center for hands-on learning and inspires an appreciation for gardening, healthy living, and historic preservation. And, if I do this right, I didn't do it right. Okay, I'll do it. I'll try to do it right. What's going on? Okay, hit that one. Okay, thank you very much. I'll just do that. Some of you, many of you know that Elua Farm was established in 1917 by the Armour family. Mr. and Mrs. Armour used the initials of their first names and last name to create the word Elua. And Elua Farm has been here for 101 years now. The picture on the left is from Waukegan Road. That was the entrance at that time. And the other picture is more recent, but it also shows you the approach, which is, for the most part, restored and not much different than it was 100 years ago. It was an actual farm, although it was a gentleman's farm and they were not dependent upon the farm for a livelihood. They did do experimentation with agricultural techniques. They had chickens and they had cows, and it was, in fact, a farm, but they also had a beautiful garden, which you see at the upper right. That is the alley of the garden, which is the way it looks today. It was restored in the early 2000s, and it is remaining a beautiful garden. You'll see the garden, the picture on the left. What is at the top of that? That was in 1998 when the city bought Elua Farm. The garden was complete buckthorn, and it was really just a thicket that you couldn't get through. And at that time, when it was decided not to tear down the buildings, but to keep the buildings and restore them, it was also decided by particularly Dee Dee Borland, who I think spent a lot of time in this room urging the city council to work with her to restore the garden. And she and volunteers spent several years just removing buckthorn and trying to establish the garden. And you will see in the picture on the lower right, that is the garden, well, very recently, maybe not this picture is a couple of years old, but that's the garden on the lower right. So a lot has changed since then. And Aloha Farm program participation growth. The city and Aloha Farm Foundation entered into an operating agreement in 2014. And since that time, since the operating agreement gave the Aloha Farm Foundation the charge to manage and maintain the property and to create programs and to create Aloha Farm essentially into what it is becoming. You can see in 2014, although the writing is kind of small, but in 2014, which is in the middle, we had 45 participants in programs, and at the end of 2017, there were 1,087. So it doubled in participation in that period of time, which is something that we are proud of, and I think citizens are happy to have that, the various programs that they can enjoy. We have many volunteers and many interns. We have interns there. This year, I know that our gardener has had 9 interns in the garden, many of them who I think intend to come back and have a lifetime of gardening in one way or another. We also have volunteers in the garden. We have volunteers in the kitchen and in the market. The close to 6,000 volunteer hours this year, we will have this year in the very busy season, which is only 26 weeks of the year. So that's a lot of people working, helping in the garden and in the market and in the kitchen. And I know that volunteers in the kitchen say that it's actually like a cooking class because they learn so much. So they're very happy. The cooks are very happy to be there learning what they can learn there. And the garden, market, and kitchen, which really this is the heart of Aloha Farm. The garden produces, and this year has really been very bountiful, producing for the kitchen and for the market. The market has grown considerably in popularity. And as I just mentioned, our kitchen, we have Amy Swartzchild, who is our chef. She's been there for the last 2 years. She has really created a following and creates wonderful food, much of it from the garden, and then also baked goods that people really come for, the muffins and the scones. Very popular. And the market is run by, our market manager is Catherine Gregg, who has done a terrific job we have some, not just food, but we also have some household goods, which are pretty much garden and kitchen related, and she's done a great job with that. And Erica Vernon, who has been with us, our garden manager for the last 2 years, has created just a bountiful, happy, wonderful garden. So we are very, very proud of them and very pleased because each of them have created, as I say, what really is the heart of Aloha Farm. We also have the weekly CSA program, which is the Community Supported Agriculture, and that is a subscription program. Each week, a person comes and picks up a big box of produce, also with a recipe from the kitchen so they know what to do with it. And it really has become very, very popular. And I know there has to be a cutoff because there's only so much produce and so much that they can also give away. But it's been very, very popular, and we're very proud of that too. We have continued to have Eagle Scout programs. We have up on the right that is a picture, up in the left corner is a picture of one of the Eagle Scouts in the root cellar. And then below that, there's shelves that have been built there. We've also had cold frames built. We've had compost bins built, birdhouses. And I do not have a picture of this, and I'm sorry, but it's desks and chairs that have been made by an Eagle Scout out of found wood. So that's been a really interesting project, and it's turned out very well. This is nonprofit partnerships that we have been involved with. On the left, we have the local young men with some disabilities who have chickens, and they collect the eggs and they sell the eggs. And I would say in the market, every Saturday or Sunday, those eggs are sold out. They're very popular and very tasty, very fresh. Just like everything else from our garden, it's immediate and fresh. In the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Historical Society last year created the storyboards, which is the history of the farm. And that was in collaboration and done because last year was the centennial, the 100-year celebration of Elua Farm. And those boards are still up for people to see. And people really do stop and read them. It's interesting to see. The Waukegan Youth Conservation Corps, they volunteer in the garden weekly. And that's a big group that you see there. It's not always that large, but they're always there and they volunteer and they are very always happy and cheerful to be there. And all the produce and baked goods that are left over from the market on Saturday then go to the local food bank. So that has been a very nice collaboration that we are able to provide, and we're happy to do that. The various Elua Farm programs, you can see, we have yoga, we have garden classes, and that's Erica, who does a wonderful job of teaching various things about the garden. The Take and Bake that's from January and through April, and that again is our kitchen chef who sends out a menu and people can order it and pick it up on Friday, and that makes the weekend a little bit easier for the cook. Gail Gand also has cooking classes as well as other chefs, but Gail's classes are particularly popular because she is a chef, a celebrity chef, but we have other chefs too who come and give cooking classes. There are flower arranging classes. The summer camp this is our second year of summer camp for little young children, and they really just love it. They love working in the garden and planting things and taking home what they've planted and what has grown. Bee Boppers meets every Friday, and it's little children and their mothers, and they sing and dance, and that is really very cute to see. And we've had luncheons with authors. Also, the beloved spectacular, Spooktacular, which is at Halloween time, and that too has become a very popular event. Children love to do that, as do their parents. So we are still hoping to have chickens and occasional farm animal, one day at a time, maybe, but we're hoping for that. And also the greenhouse that was built 3 years ago, and that has been a huge access to the garden, and because all of the plants now are grown from seed in the greenhouse, which just saves us a lot of money, and it also we can have a lot more control over what's going on and how it's growing. We do rentals. Rentals are necessary for the foundation to raise the money to protect and maintain the buildings and interior and the property. We are working with the neighbors. The neighbors would prefer more daytime activities than evening activities such as weddings. So we're working with them, and that is we're gaining balance with that, and we're working that one out. They prefer evening. We have some time constraints to have daytime activities, as many daytime activities as we would need to have to make up for loss of income for weddings, because that is our biggest income producer. But as I say, we're working with the neighbors in the city, and I think we will get that balanced. These are the harvest dinner. Last year, our harvest dinner was because it was the 100th year, we had a very special occasion, which was called Diamonds and Dahlias. We had such an overwhelming response and support. It was a great success, and so we are repeating sort of a little bit the same thing this year, although the harvest dinner is in the garden. We have fewer people coming, although we have 200, we're sold out. And so we're very, very pleased with the community support for that. It is going to be a smaller version of what we did last year, but the girl and the goat is our chef. So, and we have lots of produce vegetables from the garden. So I think it's going to be a very nice event. We have our fingers crossed for good weather, but we'll see what happens, and we'll manage one way or the other. The Thanksgiving turkeys and pies, and also side dishes it's fresh turkeys, and the pies are Elua pies, and that's always that's popular. People, it makes it a lot easier for Thanksgiving, and and they're delicious. All of it is delicious. And the holiday market is, well, we've been doing this for a long time. I don't know how many years, 10 or 12 years probably. Best Christmas trees in town. It's the first weekend in December, and in the last 2 years, the gingerbread houses have been made out of wood, which I wasn't as happy with, but this year I'm happy to announce that the gingerbread houses are going to be actual gingerbread again, which I think people will be pleased because the aroma of the gingerbread really speaks Christmas. And 101 years now. The Elua Farm Foundation is very proud of the progress that we've made with the farm, especially since the 2014 operating agreement between the foundation and the city of Lake Forest, which turned over the management and ongoing maintenance of the property and buildings to the foundation. And because we get no tax dollars, it is very important that we are financially prudent and financially sound, and we are. Partial thanks goes to Joanne Miller, our executive director, for her watchful eyes on our finances. And we also we hope to continue preserving the important history of Elua Farm and offering interesting and unique programs and activities for the entire community to participate in and enjoy. So come to the market, stroll the garden, enjoy the pastoral peace and tranquility of Elua Farm. Thank you very much. If there are any
Thank you,
questions,
Diane.
I'm happy to answer.
Very much. Eloa's come a long way from
Yes.
trees growing through the roof back in 1988.
Exactly.
Goats
To
running
today, and the future is bright, and lots of committed folks like yourself.
There are lots of, yes, a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of commitment to the farm and to what we're doing and to the future.
Well, good, terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Next, committee reports, leading with the Property and Public Lands Committee. Consideration of recommendations from the Property and Public Lands Committee and the Plan Commission in support of a resolution approving a final plat of subdivision and an amendment to the Master Land Transfer Agreement for McCormick Ravine to be presented by Alderman Jack Reisenberg, Chairman of the Property and Public Lands Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council is being asked this evening to finalize an exchange originally approved in 2015. That being the McCormick Ravine owned by the city to Open Lands in exchange for the Open Lands Park on Green Bay Road and Deer Path, and Open Lands parcel on Elua Farms. In retrospect, it was an excellent decision, proven by the extraordinary restoration of the McCormick Nature Preserve by Open Lands at no cost to the city taxpayers. This exchange also aligns these properties with each entity's core competencies, namely the city's expertise in managing parks and recreational facilities and properties, and Open Lands expertise restoring, protecting, and preserving natural habitats and sensitive natural areas. Open Lands has also been incredibly successful in obtaining private donations to support the multi-million-dollar restoration. Yet another example of how residents in our community step up to support public-private partnerships. The exchange is clearly a win-win, and as such, the Property and Public Lands Committee is requesting approval by City Council of the resolution in front of them this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. In the Alderman's packets, considerable documentation and background and recent updates on this. I see in the audience here John Santel of Open Lands. Perhaps, John, you'd like to say a few things. You've been present from the beginning on this thoughtful exchange.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, members of the City Council. As president of Lake Forest Open Lands Association, it is my privilege to represent the many dedicated governors and directors and members of our community who are equally excited to once again experience the wonder of McCormick Ravine and Woods. I'd like to begin with a thank you. We're so very appreciative of the city's help to get this project done. Our deepest thanks to you, Mr. Mayor, and to members of the council and city staff who've worked so hard on this. The public-private partnership between our city and Lake Forest Open Lands has had so many successes over the years and over several decades, actually, and we've permanently benefited not only the quality of life for our residents, but also for the flora and the fauna that reside within our community places, like Middle Fork Farm, Everett Farm, and Melody Farm Nature Preserve, just to name a few. We believe that the proposed action before you tonight is another step in a remarkable preservation project that will withstand the test of time and result in another milestone moment for our community. I'm pleased to also report that the $3.5 million restoration portion of McCormick is complete and has exceeded our expectations in many regards. Now that Lake Forest Open Lands is ready to pursue our preliminary plans to install trails and a footbridge and a new gateway entrance, this will welcome residents back to McCormick as soon as possible to experience the wonder of an extraordinary lakeshore preserve. And when completed, McCormick will not only be more beautiful, naturally healthy, and have a more stable infrastructure, but I believe it will be one of the loveliest places to spend a quiet moment in nature within our community. McCormick is truly a jewel. I thought I'd share with you one small moment that demonstrates the progress of our efforts. When we first contemplated restoring McCormick, I probably over-enthusiastically shared my passion that we'd one day see fish in the stream of McCormick again. Well, a few weeks ago, we saw just that. We saw a small school of fry swimming in one of the pools of McCormick. Back in the late 1800s, wild ravines that defined where we live today had continuously flowing water and a complex of ponds and pools and wildlife, and perhaps we've just had our first glimpse that we're recapturing not just some of our natural history, but some of the cultural history that our entire community will be able to enjoy. For a conservation organization like Lake Forest Open Lands Association, it is a privilege to undertake this work, and we'd like to thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, Mr. Kiley, and staff for your support and the opportunity to restore, care for, and give back to this truly incredible place to our community. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, John, for your thoughtful comments. Indeed, it's a large and complex property. It's taken some time to work through lots of details. Are there any questions from council on the factual information that was provided to date? We've been, of course, through this backwards and forwards many times in recent months, and we're really at the culmination of all this. And if there are no other questions, I might ask, is there any comment from the public? Any questions from the public with regard to this section tonight? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council and ask for...
Before we do that, I'd like to ask John a question.
Yes.
John, I wonder if you could explain to the mayor, the city manager, and myself how we missed the call regarding the photo shoot?
Well, I can only say that Forest and Bluff has done me a great credit. They have very good airbrush techniques over in the photography
pretty good,
studio
buddy.
over there.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, well deserved for all involved. Is there a motion to approve the resolution substantially in the form attached?
So moved.
Seconded.
And this is a roll call vote. City Clerk Boyer.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
8 yeas, 0 nay. Motion carries.
Thank you. Terrific. I did personally reflect in going through the materials this weekend that there's I think a pretty darn good chance that in very short order, particularly when McCormick is really finished in its restoration here in another year or two or three, it will leap into the top 10 reasons why we love Lake Forest. Yeah, it's a spectacular place and a real harmonious piece of nature, particularly with the lake and our new school of fish that have arrived. It's wonderful. All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Public Works Committee of the City Council regarding an approval of an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Lake Forest and the City of Highwood regarding shared water plant operator services and approval to add one additional full-time city employee position for the water plant. To be presented by Michael Thomas, Director of Public Works.
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. This evening, staff is requesting approval of an agreement between City of Lake Forest and the City of Highwood, whereby we would provide assistance in operating their water plant. Highwood came to us in 2016 to talk about the idea of us providing water to them. We did an analysis and determined it would cost about $3.7 million to run a transmission main from Western Wesley all the way into Highwood. That would obviously impact their water rate structure significantly, and they said, sorry, we can't do that. They said, is there a possibility, though, that you might be able to assist us with operating the water plant? So we began to have discussions with them. During those discussions, we were then informed that they only had 2 water plant operators, and one of them was released. So they were backed into a corner and needed some assistance. In February of this year, they asked if we could assist and provide 2 days of operation of their water plant. So we entered into an intergovernmental agreement, essentially ran from February to May, that said we would provide 2 days and they would reimburse us our overtime rate plus 7%. They subsequently came to us in June and said, gee, this is really working out great. How about we do this for the next 3+ years while we try and figure out what our next steps will be? We began to think about it internally and look at our succession plan. We have 2 water plant operators that are going to be retiring in 3 to 5 years. And we thought this was a great opportunity to bring someone on and learn the many different facets of the water plant. It's a lot more challenging bringing someone into that water plant than it is any of our other operating sections. So we proposed the idea of adding an additional employee where that employee would work at our water plant, but one of our 2 gentlemen that are getting ready to retire in the next 3 to 5 years that have been here for 30+ years that know these older water plants, which Highwood has, they would cover the Friday and Saturday at the Highwood water plant. Highwood in turn increased their rate from $63.88 up to $80 an hour. And that essentially pays for 77% of the cost of this employee to include his or her benefits. So what we're asking for permission tonight is to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with Highwood where we can capture that cooperation. We would then go and hire an additional employee that would begin to learn the water plant. And over the next 3 years, we would cover 2 days plus any of their emergency leave. But they essentially have 1 operator, and they need some assistance. This has been reviewed with Public Works. We reviewed it last Monday evening. Public Works voted unanimously in support of it. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. This is a subject that's been going on for some time, and a great deal of analysis has occurred. While Lake Forest has gone ahead and improved and modernized its water supply system, Highwood has not done so or seen fit to do so or just hasn't acted, whatever. So this is something I think thoughtfully, carefully we're edging into as perhaps a bit of an enterprise expansion. But we shall see in the fullness of time whether this makes sense. Any questions of council regarding the facts and information? Alderman Moreno.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, we've talked a lot about this as I'm on the Public Works Committee, but I would ask you to summarize the way we've addressed not only succession planning in our plant, but also the risk of taking on a management contract for another municipality. This is a labor-only exposure, is that correct?
Correct. The water plants are required to have what's referred to as a chief water plant operator. We have one. We have multiple operators that have Class A licenses. Water plants are only required to have one. I think we have 5 of them on staff. Highwood has actually contracted that out. So they have contracted with another water plant operator on the side for him to be the chief water plant operator. Excuse me. So he is ultimately responsible for providing all of the data to the IEPA and the IDNR. We simply operate the plant in the morning hours. Their plant is very different than ours. Their plant, essentially, they fill their water tower. It takes them upwards of 8 hours, and then they close the doors and leave and return the following morning. Very different, much, much older technology. But in the agreement, the indemnification, there is mutual indemnification, and if our attorney, Julie Tappendorf, may be able to elaborate a little bit more on that.
Talked about that, this at the Public Works Committee, that there is a mutual indemnification for, indemnification unless it's the sole negligence of the other party. It's pretty common in intergovernmental agreements, a little different than if we were hiring a vendor or they were hiring a vendor, to have the mutual indemnification. But also, both of the communities would still have all of the protections of the Tort Immunity Act and the other immunity protections that they have as governmental entities. Nothing in this agreement takes that away. Oh, and then one other thing, there's also language in here where Highwood waives any claims against Lake Forest for anything that happens at the plant as well, and they've agreed to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, how many employees do we have at the water plant now?
Dan, my memory, 6 plus 1? 7.
Great teamwork.
Start that over, Dan. 6 operators and 1 supervisor equals 7. Yes.
I'm feeling a lot better about the succession plan now.
Yes.
I know you got your arms
You
around
got to look
this.
at the budget a couple times, yes. So, yes, 6 operators plus 1 supervisor.
Is one of the
yes.
2 Charlie?
Yes.
Yeah,
One of the 7, yes. And one of the 2, yes, that is looking to retire soon.
Any other questions of Mike? If not, is there a comment or questions from the audience about this agreement? Please, step forward.
Thank you. Simply to know the gentleman that is to be moved to Highwood, he is aware and in agreement?
Yes, both employees, in fact, all the employees at the water plant have been working at Highwood, taking different shifts. So one may take a Friday, one may take a Saturday, and then they'll rotate it throughout the month. But they absolutely have been doing this since February, and there is no change from what they have been doing. This is an agreement between the 2 municipalities, and the gentleman that is responsible for Highwood's water plant, he is aware of that as well, the Class A operator. Yes.
Just because I'm thinking this is the person who's supposed to go, is he in the loop as well?
Oh, absolutely. All of them are. Everyone involved is.
Please come forward with your questions so people on television can hear. Come to the podium, please.
My name is Richard Sugar. I have a simple question on the indemnification provisions that are included in this agreement. The indemnification is fine and good, but does Highwood have insurance that covers the kind of liability that the city of Lake Forest would be exposed to? That's my question.
There are mutual insurance provisions in the agreement as well, that both parties have to ensure that there is a specific amount of insurance, and it's spelled out how much the insurance has to be, and also that each party adds the other as an additional insured, and Highwood has signed off on the insurance provisions.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council and ask for a motion to approve the intergovernmental agreement in your packets between the City of Lake Forest and the City of Highwood regarding shared water plant operator services and approval to add one additional full-time city employee position as water plant operator.
So moved.
Second.
This is a roll call vote.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Rommel?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
8 yeas, 0 nay. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item under Public Works is authorization for the city manager to enter into a professional services agreement with Bleck Engineering Company and Hay and Associates for professional public ravine engineering services, to be presented by Jim Lockefeer of the Public Works Department.
Good evening, and thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Tonight, the Public Works Committee, along with city staff, is requesting the council's approval for the city manager to enter into a professional services agreement with both Bleck Engineering and Hay and Associates Engineering to provide the city with professional public ravine engineering services. Now, in recognizing the full agenda ahead and looking at the city council agenda earlier today, I did prepare one slide, and I do apologize, it is a little text heavy, but it is only one slide, where I pulled some information from the city council write-up to highlight. So to begin, why designate two firms to provide professional public ravine engineering services? Ultimately, the goal there is to improve project efficiency and consistency. Both these goals relate to the heavy rains that the city has experienced and unfortunately continues to experience. You don't have to go back far to look back to last summer, the July flooding event, and then only a few months later, the city again experienced another flooding event in October. You move along into the May and June months this summer, where the city experienced a lot of heavy rain again. And yesterday was another prime example of that, with the city experiencing close to 5 inches of rain over the weekend, most of that falling yesterday. So with that, when the city does experience these heavy rains, ravine issues do occur. And what occurs when I say ravine issues, I'm talking about erosion that can ultimately wash out a ravine bank and expose city-owned public utilities, whether that's storm sewer or sanitary sewer. It's very important to address these ravine issues quickly, moving forward with an engineering firm to design a project, prepare all the necessary construction documents so that a project can then be placed out and competitively bid. And with that, too, it's important that these engineering firms are familiar with the regulatory processes in working with, for example, the Army Corps of Engineers, and ensuring that all those necessary permits are obtained. With that, we see city staff believes project efficiencies can be gained in selecting both these firms. When an issue does occur, city staff can move forward with one of these firms instantly, bring them out to the field, show them the area, and at that point they could then begin their process to prepare all those documents that I previously mentioned. One question too that I would like to add, why two firms? That reason staff discussed, we would like two firms to designate one firm if a scheduling conflict arises. These projects do tend to occur over spring, summer, fall months when the rainy season is in effect. And if one firm does have a scheduling conflict arise, we could work with another firm. And staff also felt that one of the firms, Hay and Associates, was a great addition because they are a larger firm with many resources. So if an individual ravine project is a bit more complex, we may look to use them instead of Bleck Engineering. So the process city staff utilized in recommending the firms was the request for proposal process. The city posted the request for proposal in late July, closed that 2 weeks later. The good news was we received 8 submittals. These submittals all met the minimum qualifications and really made the process very competitive. To review each of the 8 submittals, an RFP review committee was created and formed, comprised of city staff. Each member of that committee individually reviewed each submittal, and then we came together to discuss everybody's rankings and gradings and ultimately decided to proceed with our recommendation of Black Engineering and Hay and Associates. Just to describe the grading criteria quickly, all 5 are outlined there on my slide below. I will point out that as part of this process, one of the grading criteria was for the firms to submit their fee schedules, which they all did. The fee schedule was comprised of each firm's project team that they proposed in using in meeting our RFP specifications. And I will say that each firm did submit a unique project team with different hourly rates associated with them. That is outlined in the City Council write-up. Staff was comfortable, though, with the fees proposed by both Bleck and Hay and Associates. Lastly, before I turn it over to City Council for discussion, any questions that you had, I did want to discuss the budget impacts of entering into these agreements. I will point out, and I'm going a little bit out of order in my bullets here, but these firms will be utilized for projects within the $5,000 and $300,000 project amount, and that is for both engineering and construction. Typical rule of thumb is that engineering services tend to cost right around 10% of total construction, so we're not by any means looking for projects that have a $200,000 design. These are much smaller scale projects. Currently, in this current fiscal year, FY 2019, there is a ditch and ravine improvement fund identified. There's currently $130,000 allocated in that fund. Important to note, too, that the current CIP program does outline that fund as an annual allocation. It is projected 5 years out in the CIP program. These last 2 sub-bullets here, individual project designs that are greater than the $20,000 amount will definitely be brought back to City Council to seek the City Council's approval. And if total project design work for each firm does exceed the $20,000 total aggregate dollar amount in a given fiscal year, we will seek the approval of the Finance Committee Chairman, Alderman Morris. As far as the agreements go, we are requesting that the agreements be intended for a 3-year period with the option to pick up 2 additional 1-year terms. This proposal was presented to the Public Works Committee at last week's Public Works Committee meeting, similarly to when the Highwood agreement was brought to them, and it was reviewed and approved. With that, I'm happy to take any questions that the City Council has.
Thank you. Any questions, facts and figures of this arrangement? Seeing none, are there any questions from those in the audience about this of this proposal? Yes, ma'am. Please step to the podium.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Rami Lopat. I live at 410 East Woodland. I'm all for this, and I'm familiar with both firms, and you would be in good stead with both. But I do wonder if there is a list of ravine projects, and if there is an order of priority of those projects. I watched as the ravine across the street from me yesterday got pretty well flooded out in the street with it, but none of us knew whether that was a priority project or not. So how do we assign these professional services against the many projects that have got to exist in this city?
Good question.
Thank you.
Mr. Lockefeller or Thomas?
I can address it a little bit, and I'm going to step back a little bit to last summer, where the city actually implemented a new program where we had an engineering intern staffed for the summer months and his sole job was to evaluate and inventory every single ravine in Lake Forest. He went into those ravines, walked them, and essentially graded and ranked every ravine bed and bank, both left and right. Through that program, we continued to build off that. This summer, we brought back another engineering intern to again get into the ravines. He looked for a few additional things. He provided a lot of additional context. He did a great job. And with that, we also had a second intern brought in to start diving into public versus private ravines. So that is absolutely one part of it. Staff is now analyzing the results from both the 2017 and 2018 summer programs. We do have some high priority areas identified by the interns. We're moving forward and going out into the field to develop some anticipated costs, some cost estimates, and I do know that that will certainly be a part of the conversation at the September 17th workshop meeting.
Good. Well, yeah, I've known it's been evolutionary and an awful lot of research done the last 2 summers, and to really kind of create a unique grading scale, because not many communities get into their ravines with the depth of, to the depth that we have with respect to the engineering needs and their general condition. So the timing is right, I guess, in one sense, because we're in the capital planning months of the annual fiscal year. So we'll learn more in September 17th, you're saying.
Correct.
Any other questions from the public? Yes, ma'am. Could I ask you to step to the podium, please, so others can hear?
Just a quick question.
I guess I'm supposed to say my name. So Kobe Stein, Lake Forest resident. Just wondering, I understood what you were saying, that there is clearly a difference between public and private ravines. I'm only asking the question, if it is a private ravine, is that the responsibility of the community or the individual?
The latter, all things being equal. Most of the title lines for properties run down the center of the ravines, so there's an awful lot of the ravines are actually owned privately.
Okay, so it is the city who will take care of both, or
No, it's
explain to me what you meant by that.
It's the property owner's responsibility to answer your question.
Yeah. It is. Okay, so the privates are the owner's
Right.
responsibility.
One of the thoughts or one of the concepts we're thinking through in terms of the city's support of thinking through the right thing to do for these ravines over the long run is to come up with processes, systems, suggestions, plans, best practices, principles for caring for the ravines, not only the bottoms of the ravines, but the slopes and so forth. And that's what I just said, didn't take that long, but to actually produce that product in a way that it's meaningful is very hard. And this is something the city's actually been thinking about for a long period of time.
Okay.
And so the city's going to be a very interested participant in all of this, but there's most all of the ravines, very high percentage of it are privately owned. But we need to thoughtfully and in a smart way take steps to preserve, protect, defend.
Okay, and I understand that, and I agree with that, but I also always like to give a plug to the whole east side and their whole flooding problem.
Yeah.
Basements, et cetera. So while this is important, I also like to bring that up, that needs money too, because it's very outdated.
Yes, ma'am.
I
Well,
mean,
we're
my daughter,
well aware of
frankly,
it.
on the east side had water in her basement again.
Me
So
too.
I know it was heavy rains, I understand
Thank
that, but we on the west side had no problems. So I think it's the east side that needs help.
Thank you, ma'am. With that, I'll bring it back to council and to ask for a motion to authorize the city manager to enter into a professional services agreement with Bleck Engineering and Hay and Associates for professional public ravine engineering services. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
So roll call vote.
Alderman Beidler.
Aye.
Alderman Morris.
Aye.
Alderman Newman.
Aye.
Alderman Rummel.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack.
Aye.
Alderman Moreno.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
8 yeas, 0 nay. Motion carries.
Thank you. It's a busy night for the Public Works Committee. Last but not least is a report from the Forest Park Bluff Advisory Committee update, led by Alderman Morris, and I think Public Works Director Michael Thomas will also be
Good.
part of the song and dance team.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight, we will provide the community an informational update about the recent Forest Park bluff failure. The bluff failure occurred about 9 weeks ago on June 27th. The area that failed is in the northern portion of the forest park. This area north of the ring road was left in a natural state with the oak woods, oak trees and oak wood area during the renovation of the rest of the park. The landscape team that was working with the Forest Park organization did some planting of some younger trees and shrubs in the area, but no other work was done in that part of the park. The June 27th bluff failure occurred in one of 5 significant risk areas. These were identified by our engineering consultants. There's a second risk area that's also failing, which is underneath the boardwalk that leads down to the beach. Due to the clear and present dangers from these failing bluffs of those 2 areas, both the North Beach access road and the boardwalk were closed to the public. Subsequently, the mayor appointed a committee of aldermen, some city staff, and engineers to investigate options for remediating the current North Bluff failure. Mike Thomas, Director Thomas, the Public Works Department, is going to provide a presentation of our committee work, working with the engineers and city staff, and will explain the repair options that we've identified that we'll be considering for remediation of the bluff failure itself. As I said, this is an informational presentation because at the next city council meeting on the 17th, we will consider what path to take, what specific path to take on the bluff remediation. And we will determine how we will finance the cost of the repairs in addition to some of the other tasks we have in front of us, including ravines and storm sewers. So, Director Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. So this evening we will provide a PowerPoint review. Many of the aldermen have seen the bluff failure, so this is PowerPoint to try and capture everything that has been discussed, as well as to educate the public more on where we are currently at with addressing that. We'll quickly review who's on the advisory committee. We'll provide an overview of the high-risk zones, focusing on the north end, discuss the failure itself, and then take a look at the conclusions that the committee has had, and then we'll have a table at the end that compares the different options: cost, tree loss, amount of land impacted, etc. Again, this is simply for yourselves to take back and over the next couple of weeks think about, and if would like to visit the area and review one more time. The purpose of the advisory committee appointed by the mayor was to provide the mayor and the city council with a recommendation to remedy the recent bluff failure at the North Beach access road. The committee members included the chair, Judd Morris, finance committee chairman, Ray Bushman, our public works committee chairman, members of the Forest Park Board and Forest Park Preservation Board, a handful of staff, and our engineer, Bill Weaver with AECom, and Bill Vanaki with Kino, the construction company. They are here this evening as well. So again, an overview of the high-risk zones. Bill Weaver from AECom provided a report to the City Council March of 2017 that reviewed the three areas, the southern area, the central, and the north. We are going to be focusing on the north area this evening. So the north risk zone, the areas in red are the areas that are significantly challenged and of interest and really of concern. This middle area is the area that has actually failed, but the area adjacently, immediately to the south, those areas are, in bad shape as well. That is an aerial shot approximately a week after the failure occurred. We had a drone fly in and take a look at it. The Forest Park Bluff Advisory Committee concluded with essentially 5 different options, 3 primary ones, and then 2 of them were extensions of sort. The first option is to regrade the slope, very similar to what we see on the south end that we did last fall, where that slope is regraded to a 2-to-1 slope. We will go over each of these in more detail. Option 2 is to do some regrading, but also install what we refer to as a soldier pile wall, 13-foot tall wall. We have one on the south end as well. It's only 7 feet tall. This one would be taller and would require tiebacks be drilled into the side of the bluff. The third option is to reconstruct the road completely and bring the road as you come down further east onto the beach at a softer curb, and then turn north and head to the parking lot. The 2 extended bluff remediation areas are essentially taking option 1 and adding an additional 60 to 80 feet and capture that area that is beginning to fail, or option 3A, where the road again would be extended, but we would again move this area and capture the area a little bit further south. There's a lot on these slides, and I provided paper copies for the aldermen to take home, and happy to provide any to the residents as well. Option 1, to regrade, it would require going to a 2-to-1 slope, and essentially we would regrade, have a bench, a flat area, and then regrade down as well. To do that, we would need to take approximately 30 feet of the tableland. To be able to achieve that 2-to-1 slope, and that's the only slope that engineers will sign off on, the steepest that they will sign off on, we would have to go back 30 feet. The contractor then noted that he would need at least an additional 15 feet to bring his backhoe in and his semi-trucks. This would be operated from the top of the bluff. There'd be a very large backhoe that essentially would be sitting on top and reshaping that bluff to a 2-to-1 slope. As far as tree loss on the tableland, we would have approximately 12 trees that we would need to remove. There would be 49 of them on the bluff, although Chuck Myers, our superintendent of Parks and Forestry, has noted that the tableland trees are much better quality trees, trees that are of more interest to the city. 24 plants or transplants as well, as well. Depending upon what City Council ultimately decides, if time is an issue, if it is determined that we would like to have this North Beach Access Road open for next Memorial Day, then staff would highly recommend we pursue a design build. And that we would need to pursue within the next 30 to 45 days. If, however, City Council would like to take the opposite approach and have a design that we put out to bid, that is fine. We don't believe the project we would be able to complete until November. So there are 2 distinctions. So time has a part in this, not only from a beach operation, but from this weekend as well, we're going to continue to receive the heavy rains. So there is some risk there as well as far as scope creep. Option 1, these are engineering schematics that review the basic bluff remediation. What you see on the left is where the bluff failure exists, And then the drawing on the right actually shows the regrading, so you can get an idea of the number of trees and how much more open it would be. Option two. Option two has the installation of the soldier pile wall. And the good thing with this is that we do not need as much table land. We still need that 15 feet to operate, but we only need anywhere from 5, maybe 7 feet that we would actually cut and regrade. So less trees impacted. Again, however, the installation on this would occur from the top of the bluff. Less trees impacted, same timeline. If we do a design build, we could have this completed by Memorial Day and the road opened up. If we put it out to bid, we don't see it completing or having completion until November of next year. The cost on this one, and I forgot to highlight the cost on the first option, was $685,000. For this one, the option is $1.5 million. I know it is a 13-foot tall wall. Bill, is it approximately? 210 feet or so. Okay, 210 feet long, 13 feet tall. This is, again, an engineering rendering of what option 2 would look like. Again, on the left, we show the bluff failure, and then on the right, you have the soldier pile wall, and this is what it would look like. Again, we would need to clear the bluff, we would need to regrade the bluff, and you'd have a wall. That wall can consist of concrete panels, it can consist of wood panels. Obviously, the wood we would need to replace a little more frequently. The concrete will last a pretty long time. The third option, our committee actually referred to this as option 4, but we're going to condense things and call it option 3. Option 3 is rerouting the road. So it would follow adjacent to the ravine down, but then again it would head further east and wrap around to the parking lot. The difference with this option is that all of the work would be done at the base or the toe of the bluff. We would not necessarily need to bring any equipment in up top, although we show that there is a 15-foot construction area. We have talked internally and would try our darndest to do all of this work from the bottom. You not only would reroute the road, there is a storm sewer in there we would need to reroute as well, but we would bring in fill, essentially CA6, crushed limestone. We would bring in fill that would then be covered up with clay and black dirt, and we would plant the whole thing. But you bring in fill to actually add support to that entire bluff system. So we would eliminate the risk of those adjacent areas failing. So in option 1 and in option 3, these options are 100% complete, and we can walk away and know that the problem is addressed. Again, no trees would be impacted as far as removed on the tableland. The bluff would be cleared. The cost estimate on this, $1.8 million, so approximately $300,000 more. But again, what that is doing is it's adding support to the adjacent areas next to the failure area. So again, the basic bluff remediation, option 3, if you look again on the left, the area that failed, and then the new roadway with a fill being brought in to support the bluff, and the new roadway coming along the north end. So those are the 3 basic options. You have regrading from the top, you have installation of a soldier pile wall with some regrading, and then you have the rerouting and reconstruction of a road, but also bringing in fill to support those areas. We talked about 1A and 3A, meaning that the area just south of the failure, if you walk out there today, there is a good area that has probably sunk 15 plus feet. I was there yesterday morning around 10:30 and quite frankly a little nervous standing there. That area is right here. And as we talked about these options of adding, the premise was that we and the engineers are concerned that those areas at some point are going to fail as well. And it obviously makes the most economic sense from a logistical standpoint that when you are there, get it done, knock it out, and then you are done with this roadway. Whether you regrade it or you extend the road, but you then address these red areas, these areas of high risk. So 1A, the A option, this is the additional area to the south. And that cost estimate, again, if we simply regrade from the top of the bluff, that cost estimate is approximately $970,000. Yes, 17 trees would be removed. You'd have 69 on the bluff, and we would transplant 31. Again, same timeline as well, but again, it would address this area that's failing. The cost of $970,000 would include the rerouting of that road and the walkway as well. We would have to bring those a little bit further west into this area, but again, it addresses the issue. The final one, 3A, if we were to reroute the road, and this is the newly proposed road, and we bring in the fill to support the bluff in this area. If we go further south, this is again, this A area, this additional area, this is the area that would be picked up. And the cost goes up a little bit to 1.975. But again, remember, we're working from the bottom, so we are not going to lose any trees. And the bluff itself would lose trees, but not the tableland where we have significant hickories and oaks. Timelines are very similar, again, depending upon how urgent City Council feels this needs to be addressed. We could have it completed by May, or we wait till I have it completed in the fall. I apologize, there's a lot of information on this table, but it was our attempt to try and summarize for you the amount of trees removed, the amount of tableland impacted, and their proposed costs. And with that, and I understand there's a lot of information, so I'm here and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you. As we've said, we're going to deep dive into this in 2 weeks, and there's even more refinements, I'm sure, being thought up as we go along. Are there any particular thoughts or questions at this time?
Yeah, I just had a quick question around how to consider strategic options 1, 2, and 3, given the state of the secondary and tertiary areas of the bluff that are eroding, given the rains. I mean, is it even really viable to consider 1, 2, or 3 as an option, given their current state? And isn't it really a decision between 1A and 3A, or if you could just elaborate on that?
I would agree with you completely, that 1A and 3A, the challenge there, obviously the financials. And as City Council, and we will discuss at the 17th, there's significant capital need in the city. Storm sewers, ravines, pension, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But to do it right and to be done, 1A or 3A is it. And you are then done with the north end, just like we are done with the south end. The south end is finished, it's complete, that won't move.
Alderman Newman.
I just had a question for Alderman Beidler, in that some of these options involve loss of trees up on the tableland, which is part of Forest Park, right? Mm-hmm. So how would the donors feel about losing any of those trees after we just completed a restoration of the Forest Park?
I think we heard, right after this happened, I think at our first meeting in July, we heard some pretty impassioned comments from 2 of the members of the Forest Park, whatever it's called, the Preservation Committee, the group that's looking at it going forward. I mean, this was deliberately left pretty much untouched in that project because it's such a beautiful grove of trees. But this is one of those things where we have to make choices. I mean, the public safety is aesthetically, those trees we'd love to do everything we can to keep them there. But I think what we're going to have to talk about in a couple of weeks is the math. Can we make this work when we have other competing needs? The one thing I think we probably also should talk about, and I know your committee at least considered the option of not rebuilding the road. So, sort of letting this be in a kind of a natural state. I notice you're not bringing that that recommendation forward, Alderman Morris, I assume because that's
we've
just
talked
not
about it.
considered viable.
A number of people have brought that to our attention, including
Yeah,
Alderman
yeah,
Llewellyn
that was my
and
understanding.
Alderman Bushman. When Alderman Bushman and I walked the area, what's clear is that, A, there's a diminution of use of the facility because you'd lose the north parking lot, which has over 80 parking spaces. We've talked about, could you expand the south a little bit? Because there's some grassed-in areas there, but it doesn't accommodate that. And I think the director for the park said there's probably 80,000 visitors in the course of a summer. So it would be, first of all, a loss to the city in terms of a jewel. The second one is the public safety. If you go out there now and look at that adjacent area, 1A and 4A, or 3A, it's right beneath the ring road where it turns to the west, coming up from the south, and there's a big bench there that looks out over the vista. And that's about 5 feet from the edge of the bluff. So if this other portion fails, it's going to undermine the ring road. So the ring road's going to have to be rerouted. Well, if you don't do something, will that fall this year, next year? And what happens to the ring road when it goes? And how much will that cost to reroute that and to take care of that bluff failure? So that's why we didn't pursue it. Didn't fix the problem. It looked away from the problem and left it there.
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Without getting into the pros and cons, because we can be here for a very long time, and there were a lot of questions asked by the advisory group. One comment hasn't been made that should be made. Staff has done an outstanding job. The gentleman at the podium there, I don't know how he's spent all the time and still does his normal job by the amount of effort he's put into this. Chuck Myers, Sally Swarthart, they've all done an outstanding job dealing with, actually an act of Mother Nature, that we've got a problem here. And there are a lot of questions here. I walked away from all the discussions. There's no easy answer, but hopefully we can put our heads together, good deliberations, and come up with the right solution here. And it's a solution, yes, we have long-term questions here. How far do you extend it down? What do you do today? What do you do tomorrow? There's also the question of what short-term remediation should we do? If we're going to spend, a year and a half doing one of these developments, what can we do to operate, what Alderman Morris referred to as the impact on the use of that facility. And we had just some general discussions, what sort of barriers, what sort of monitoring equipment, what can we do to maybe have a controlled, partial, limited access to the north parking and maybe the north road. But again, there's no answers. I don't have answers to them, but and hopefully we can move it along very well in 2 weeks from now.
I think the other thing, I know Alderman Morris and I were talking about this. You noticed in one of the earlier slides, Mike, maybe pull that up, that noted the 3 main zones. This one focusing on the north zone, but there are 2 other zones that have been, I think, that we're monitoring. Actually, of course, at the south, we've already, thank goodness, we had done the improvement of that road, because just to remind everybody, that's how the people who were at the beach when the road, when there was the slide, that's how people got out. Was the police routed them out, I think, along the sidewalk there, and which is wide enough for a vehicle, and up the other road. So, we sort of proved the necessity of the 2 roads on that occasion. But there's certainly possible degradation in those other zones. I mean, there's no question about that. And I guess we sort of treat this as a case by case, that we're a beach with a bluff. I know Lake Bluff apparently in '89 had a very similar thing and hasn't had trouble since, I guess. At least I think that's what I understood.
They just
from
had some. So Cliff Miller, who's on our committee, has been working with Lake Bluff to remediate a fall that they just had.
Oh, they just had another one. Oh, all right, because I thought, in any case, lots of people are trying different things on this, and I think we'll just have to watch and see, but clearly there's some urgency.
That the presentation did not highlight, and Chairman Morris did, the public safety risk. So if we don't do anything, fine, but that North Beach access road has to remain closed. And I think in very short order, we'll look at closing that top area as well, because there's absolutely none of us that can tell you when that area is going to fail. It will, but that area, people have got to stay clear of it, especially that area just to the south. So there is a public safety aspect of it. There is the service level of people wanting and residents wanting to go to the beach. There's a financial issue to it. There's a short-term and long-term. It is a very, very challenging question placed in front of you.
All important stuff to think about, and we'll have plenty to talk about on the 17th. So, thank you.
May I just make a comment? And I spoke with Alderman Morris about this, and that's what you're referring to. I think that whatever solution we come up with may take some time. And so for the 17th, when we're considering this and the financial implications of it, I hope that we'll have a count of such things as how many parking spaces are at the north end, how many parking spaces are at the south end, how many are up above, how many days this year was there off-street, were there cars parked off-street? In other words, how many days this summer were we unable to accommodate usage by parking cars in the south area? That's something I would be very interested in having the numbers on for the 17th.
Yes, we will work with Sally and the Park Rec Department to put that
Director
together.
is actually on that case.
Data helps.
As we speak. All right, well, thank you for the update, the Mother Nature update, if you will. Next on the agenda is the opportunity for citizens to address the council on non-agenda items. I received three requests, actually two from the same person. So Dan Sebald has a question or wanted to comment on the third track, and also about 721 McKinley building. So please, if you can, maybe squeeze it down a little so we can get everybody in here.
Dan Sebald, 560 Ivy Court. I'll be quick. First item was the third rail holding track, and I haven't appeared on this because the topic kind of reemerged after some time, and the city's stance on this seems to have shifted a little bit. And I'm not sure where I stand on this, but I know that rail infrastructure in this country is sorely lacking. It's underfunded. It's just an embarrassment to see derailments across the country, train wrecks, comparing our rail system to other countries. So infrastructure really needs to be funded. And I know passenger rail in this country is hindered by the fact that it has to operate on freight lines. Also, rail companies have a lot of authority regarding their land. It's historical, and sometimes there's not a lot that can be done. So I'm just curious about the city's stance on this and the idea of writing a letter opposing it outright. One question, do we know, there was a derailment in Lake Forest, do we know what caused that? Was it infrastructure? Was it the train going too fast? Would positive train control have affected that? We don't know. Will the orientation of the track, when the train is sitting there and an Amtrak goes by, will the sound be reflected off of the train? That could be a benefit. There's been talk about safety. The big safety issue is the depot on the west side. And clearly, again, infrastructure and a pedestrian underpass would have been very nice in the past 20 years. The environmental angle, I'm not so sure about. I mean, there's been other items that the city has approved, and environment was a concern, so I'm not so sure about that. My perspective is work with Representative Schneider to get a good view of what is happening from the federal level. And just let me point out, in Wisconsin, there was a train deal with Talgo Train 10, 15 years ago. It was a bipartisan effort. The governor came in and used that as a political wedge, canceled the project. The Talgo sued, so on, so on. The governor thought that money could be used for building roads instead. It was just fumbled that topic, and I just don't want to see that repeated. Quickly, the other item was McKinley Road. A year ago, there was a building that was approved, and I went by the other day and I saw 5-foot-high fence posts installed, and I don't recall any discussion about fence posts, any renderings of a fence. I have one rendering from a news article. I see a hedgerow, there's no fence. The issue there is that this 5-foot-high fence coming into the city, it gives the impression of a gated community if you get off the train. Also, it makes it clear that this is not the front of the building. So on McKinley, you will have, depending on what happens with that other parcel, possibly one building facing the street, and that would be the house. And that's just
Right.
not
Well,
a very good
why don't we do
streetscape.
this? The Community Development Department can get you a note about the specifics of the approval for that fence on McKinley.
No, that's what I'm wondering about. I didn't follow that. After the building was approved, I recalled a setback approval for the overhanging balconies. There was a variance for that because it went past the setback. A fence is much more imposing than a balcony. So, but I don't know what I thought, once it was approved, that was it. I didn't follow from that.
All right.
Kathy
Next,
can follow up with Mr. Seabolt, explain that to
Yeah,
her.
well, the staff will follow up on that, those series of thoughts. Joanne Desmond. In uniform, I see.
Sorry, me again. New clothes. There are countless mysteries in the world, but our city government shouldn't be one of them. And yet, in Lake Forest, we have witnessed a lack of transparency, backroom deliberations, and a failure to authentically communicate with residents. This is combined with other mystifying actions, like your inability to vote at your last meeting to support a simple resolution. These actions only serve to reinforce a widely held perception that there is a new, unspoken city agenda, a change from the quality of life and resident-friendly community that has been our history. In fact, it is not inconsequential that there is an emergence of grassroots citizen groups like Action and Integrity Caucus that are working together to have our voices heard. This only results from a perceived disconnect between the citizens of Lake Forest, especially those in West Lake Forest, and the government that was elected to represent our best interests. The absence of trust in our leadership is the direct result of the manner in which our mayor, our city manager, and some aldermen have responded to serious public concerns that have far-reaching and long-lasting harmful impacts. We understand that you are volunteers, like those of us involved with Action and the Integrity Caucus. What we fail to understand is why, as our city leaders, you do not make the health, safety, and well-being of all your residents, and the preservation of our natural resources, including the threatened Middle Fork savanna, your highest priority. We were pleased to see that you supported the McCormick Ravine this evening. It is inauthentic to say you can't do anything because the railroad is outside of your control, when you have demonstrated otherwise in lobbying the railroad to get what you want. And all the while, the village of Glenview is working in concert with their residents to do everything possible to stop this project from destroying their community. For many of us, welcome home doesn't seem to apply to those that live here. However, it doesn't have to continue to be that way. The City Council can still demonstrate true leadership and prioritize the preservation of our quality of life by working with the people who live here to fight what threatens our future. We welcome that leadership. Our future depends on it. Don't wait until an EA is made public and it's too late to take action. That will be your legacy. Thank you.
First of all, I'm aware of no secret agendas. Number two, no, the direction of the city council and its leadership with respect to the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens has not changed at all. What we have here is a disagreement about how to get the best results with regard to this third track and not having it built. So there are a lot of conversations, as I reported this evening, and I think more can be expected from those. And we are working in conjunction with Glenview. Next, Rami Lopat. Comments on, I think, 3 separate subjects.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question? One of the subjects appears to be in your omnibus agenda. How do I address that?
I can't quite read this. So which
Interested in the building review board petition at McKinley and Scott. It appears to be in the omnibus.
Yes.
Do I address it as part of your next agenda item?
Well, if you want to ask your question now,
Yeah.
and then the council can decide if they want to pull that from the omnibus and deal with it separately, but why don't you approach the podium and deal with your 3 now and then.
Yeah, I think that's what I do.
It's not a question, it's a comment. I guess the question is, would you please vote against this? That's not a question. Yes, it is. My name is Rami Lopat. I live at 410 East Woodland Road. I live a couple of blocks away from this proposed residence duplex, actually, at McKinley and Scott. Back in March 20th to be exact, at 5:14 p.m., I took a picture when I was out for a walk past McKinley and Scott, this very lot where I was very familiar with the woman that lived there for many, many, many years. And I saw a sign out there, and it said, luxury, attached single-family home, 3 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, mid-900s, and it had a picture, delivery fall 2018, and I was actually horrified at this picture. I couldn't believe that a McMansion was going to be built at the corner of McKinley and Scott. It has a high French roof line. It had barn. It's just a McMansion. There's no question that it has nothing to do with the character of this neighborhood. But me bad, I did not attend any BRB meetings. I didn't know about this, had no idea. Went home, thought, well, there's nothing I can do until tonight when I saw this agenda item. And went, oh my God, it's back. Well, the roof is lower, but it appears to still be way, I think it's probably 50% beyond the setbacks. I can't really tell from little pictures. And that's the facade, the north facade is well beyond, closer to the street than the neighboring houses. That's something we try to avoid. Motor court, try to avoid. McMansions in a neighborhood that is small, charming houses, try to avoid that. Gumdrop bushes around the perimeter. The city code calls for a wooded character in landscaping. French roofs, lower. And certainly the marketability of this duplex. We're having a hard time selling the $1 million mansions that Austin Dupree designed, beautiful townhouses that look across to the railroad tracks and the Jewel right there. So these are right in that same market category. I would just say, please, think again. This is an intact neighborhood with no outliers in its character. Mayor, you would appreciate that. You live in that neighborhood too. So I just would like you to reconsider. Thank you. Shall I ask a question?
Well, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda are items for omnibus vote consideration. There are 10 this evening. First is approval of the August 6th City Council meeting minutes. Second, approval of the check register for the period of July 21st to August 24th, 2018. Third, approval of a 3-year professional services agreement with Invoice Cloud for credit card processing services and integration with the new ERP system. Approval of Cypher Shaw LLP for professional legal services related to the McCormick Nature Preserve land transfer in an amount not to exceed $24,000. Fifth, consideration of an ordinance authorizing the Elowa Farm Spooktacular event. First reading, and if desired by council, final approval. 6, award of bid for a 3-year HVAC preventive maintenance contract to First Point Mechanical Services LLC in the amount of $151,177.64. 7, approval to waive the competitive bidding process and authorize Phase 1 of the Waukegan Road Sidewalk Replacement Project to Performance Paving Limited in the amount of $199,000. And after 10 to 15 years, we can be proud to be voting on approval of a resolution granting temporary easements for the construction of stormwater facilities on the Deer Path Golf Course and authorizing the mayor and city manager to act on behalf of the city of Lake Forest on associated documents. Consideration of an ordinance approving a recommendation from the Building Review Board, first reading, and if desired by the council, final approval. And then consideration of ordinances approving recommendations from the Zoning Board of Appeals, first reading, and if desired by council, final approval. As before, any item can be removed if it's the will of the council. Short of that, are there any particular questions of staff on any of these items from council? This is all work in process for some time, obviously. Let's see. If there are no comments, then I'll ask for a motion to approve the
So moved.
omnibus. Is there a second?
Second.
This is a roll call vote.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
8 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. Next item of business is new business. The approval of an intergovernmental agreement and substantially the form attached hereto between Rockland Fire Protection District, Village of Libertyville, the City of Lake Forest, and the Libertyville Fire Protection District for fire and ambulance service, and to authorize the mayor, the city manager, attorney, and city clerk to proceed with execution of the intergovernmental agreement, to be presented by Peter Siebert, Chief of the Lake Forest Fire Department.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Lansing, members of council. Thank you for having me up here tonight. Tonight we're looking for your approval on a proposed intergovernmental agreement, as the Mayor just described. I just thought it would be a good idea to kind of show how we got to where we are, because there's been a lot of stuff in social media, a lot of stuff in the news. This isn't the first time we've seen this proposal. This is the latest revised proposal, but I just kind of wanted to give a little history on how we got to where we are right now. I did a little digging and found out from some of our retired members that back in 1976, around that time, Lake Forest started paramedic service and transporting ambulance. So from the time of 1976 to just around 2005, we provided ambulance service to the village of Knollwood for no cost, no annual fee, just a handshake agreement, and we billed the patients. Around 2005, they saw the need to maybe put in an intergovernmental agreement and to charge an annual fee, and that was agreed upon. Then about 2008, there was renegotiated to a fee structure similar to what we were doing with Lake Bluff at the time. Fast forward to around 2015, Rockland terminated the contract with Lake Forest that we had provided over 40 years of service with them, and signed an intergovernmental agreement with Libertyville to provide ambulance service within the village of Knollwood. From the time of 1976 to just before 2015, Lake Forest covered all of Knollwood. We responded with ambulances to their entire district. So Libertyville entered into that contract with them, and then towards the end of 2016, there was some renegotiations, and I was asked to submit another proposal to us to come back and do ambulance service, basically competing with Libertyville for this contract. Libertyville was awarded that contract, and then we subsequently, about a year later, a lot of these dates are just kind of estimated. I'm just kind of give a rolling timeline. Rockland Fire Protection District asked Lake Forest and Libertyville to give individual proposals on a fire and EMS total service package. Looking at how things went with ambulance and competitive bidding, we sought to go into partnership with Libertyville to try to come and answer all of the negative comments and people that saw shortcomings in either organization, to try and blend together to come up with a great proposal that would answer all the questions. So fast forward now to 2018, we've had several public forums, answered many questions, done some revisions to the IGA that have been suitable for all sides involved. And just recently, on Friday the 31st, the Rockland Fire Protection District Board voted to approve the IGA that you have in your packet tonight. So real quickly, I just wanted to hit on the highlights of the proposal. Most of you have read this. I'm not going to go over the entire IGA. This just is a great partnership with Lake Forest and Libertyville working together. And we're not just providing fire and EMS, we're also going to add the addition of Fire Prevention Bureau services and public education. And so basically, it's an integrated partnership between the two departments and providing service to the residents of the Rockland Fire Protection District that is similar and equal to what the Libertyville residents and the Lake Forest residents get. The proposal also offers employment opportunity at the City of Lake Forest. We employ part-time, or they're called POP, paid on-premise firefighters, and several of their part-time employees we have extended the offer to come apply with us and work with us if this offer goes through. So looking at all that, we think it's a cost-effective, innovative, and it improves the response capability to Rockland, and quite frankly, it has Libertyville and Lake Forest working together better than they ever had. Again, just to kind of highlight fire, EMS, fire prevention. So included in fire and rescue there, we also have specialized response if there's a rope rescue, a trench collapse, dive rescue, all our specialized teams. We offer ALS service, which is advanced life support, as well as BLS, basic life support. All of our staff in Lake Forest are trained to the level of paramedic, as Libertyville as well. Myself, our newest member to myself are all paramedics. And then another, I think a key addition is the Fire Prevention Bureau services, inspecting some buildings in that area that might not have had inspections in a long time. And also the offer to do the same type of public education, block parties and community outreach that we do within Lake Forest and Libertyville to offer to the Knollwood residents. Just a quick map to show, it's explained in the intergovernmental agreement that we were going to split the response between Libertyville and Lake Forest, with Libertyville, their Station 3 located on Atkinson Road would be all properties north of the EG&A railroad tracks, and Lake Forest would be south. And those are just the designations of the district. For Libertyville, 46K, and Lake Forest would be 42K. Looking at, I would like to take credit for some of these, but I can't, and Elizabeth Hollab provided all of our financial information, and which I owe her a lot of debt there. She's helped us out quite a bit. So just a quick snapshot of what the first year would look like at the proposed amount of $450,000, a 50-50 split between the two departments. You can see that the ambulance billing revenue there, Libertyville on their last year, I believe estimated around $35,000, again, splitting 50%. And then Libertyville would then lose some of the income, the revenue from their ambulance contract, and then we also have some impact with overtime to keep at our minimum staffing and adding on of part-time staff to augment. So you can see the net budget impact, hitting pretty similar. Where, those numbers might pan out a little differently just depending on many variables. This chart, definitely, if we want to get deeper into it, I'd ask Elizabeth to expand on it, but it just kind of shows the status quo is there on the top, and then with our proposed IGA, kind of showing the, marching out 10 years and showing, the estimated costs and how they kind of taper off, and the proposed IGA in our vision shows a substantial savings in that over that time. So I know I've hit on a lot of stuff in there. I tried to go pretty quickly there with the meeting here, but I wanted to leave room for questions from the council or from anyone in the audience.
This, as Pete's historical summary indicates, this is a concept and a proposal that's been many years in the making. And there's sort of, I guess, 2 or 3 main drivers. One is that the world of life safety, particularly EMT services, specialized fire protection services, and all kinds of other things that are mixed into the work, the daily life of a fire department, are becoming more complex, much more training rigorous, much more capital intensive. And when we're so lucky enough, for example, to have such a wonderful state-of-the-art hospital, there's the opportunity to be essentially hardwired, when the ambulance rolls up to your house, to be hardwired right to the heart specialist at the hospital, and that's just not simply done, and that sort of thing. 2, there's just the matter of cost and efficiency so that we can fund and support that. And when the world was a lot different, many decades ago, local communities had volunteer fire departments, and communities still have them, but they are at quite a handicap for volunteers to keep up with the modern world of technology in life safety and emergency services of one kind or another. There is enormous amount of cost savings for Libertyville and Lake Forest. It allows us to, again, fund and invest in the quality of our services and extend them to others as an enterprise. It's an idea that goes back even before when I was on council more than 20 years ago. And I commend Pete Siebert, Elizabeth Hollab, and others on city staff that have really pushed on this. And I do want to ask, I see in the audience, if there is to be a godfather of this effort, it's former Public Works Chairman of the Can we knock Dave off there a little bit?
We don't do air ducts with the fire department.
Turn it off. Former Alderman Randy Tack really spearheaded an acceleration of this consideration by the city of Lake Forest, Libertyville, and our adjoining communities. I would have to say in summary, I think Lake Forest, once again, has been a leader. I commend Libertyville for the foresight and leadership also in their fire department, Chief Karani. But this is the trend and the wave of the future of intergovernmental services, if you will. But it's driven by maintaining, investing in, and making even better our services here in Lake Forest through a more manageable economic model, and for all those who we will serve. Are there any particular questions or comments from council members?
Thank you.
Alderman Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, I've never asked you about the borders of Knollwood to the north. I think Abbott Labs is up there.
Yes.
Do they have their own fire department?
That would be, they have a fire brigade that works within their corporation, but it's usually the employees there that do a dual purpose. But Libertyville Station 3, they respond into the Abbott Labs there.
Thank you. So that's completely outside of what we're
That would be
looking-
Libertyville Fire Protection District in there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We've had several meetings on this subject in recent months, as I said earlier. Alderman Tack, would you like to make a few comments about this impending decision? You had a lot to do with making this happen. Sure. Yeah. It's that bad. You gotta get up front.
He can't possibly have forgotten already.
Honorific.
Yeah, so this is something worth coming back for me, because we did push on this for a long time, about 4 years in the making. And the one thing I would say about it as presented is that you have to look at this as the very beginning, not nowhere near the end of this, because if it stops where it is, as proposed, it doesn't do very much, quite honestly. It gives Knollwood a little more security for fire protection, but it doesn't do much in terms of bending the curve and the cost of providing professional life safety services. I have to say that we went through 2 fire chiefs on this, and in the beginning, there was tremendous resistance on the part of the professional fire staff, and I think it was just the usual resistance you get to change. But once we changed fire chiefs, and it had nothing to do with this, I don't think, and Pete Siebert came in, the mindset began to change, looking at what could be and why this could be better for the professional firefighters, the communities involved, and also, bending down the cost curve. One of the problems we have, as you all know, is this pension problem that we really can't do a whole lot about, other than the ability to potentially distribute that cost over a much larger group of people. But that requires certain things. It requires the way that we change the way we provide fire and life safety services. These guys, our professional firefighters, need to have a future where they work at the top of their license, not at the bottom of their license. Community fire services frequently do too much of the latter. If you look at what they spend their time doing, it's not fighting fires, it's not providing high-level life safety, it's providing low-level life safety. And we need to find a new model within this framework to deliver those services at a much lower cost so that we can free our highly trained people to do what they're highly trained to do. So again, from my perspective on this is, it took 4 years to actually get to this point, which is remarkable to me, but it's got much further to go, and it's going to take a lot of effort from community staff, and I think you saw probably at Knollwood how receptive some people are to the idea of changing things. But I think at the end of the day, if we keep going on this, and I think Pete is pretty committed to doing that, I think he sees the future in this, that we can really be a model for other communities. The alternative, of course, is no longer having local fire services, because plain and simple, the model that we had in existence was unsustainable. And all you have to do is run the numbers. In fact, when I was originally asked to be part of this, 3 months into it, I sent an email to Bob saying, we can't have a fire department. You just run the numbers and there's no way you can do it. And you look out into the future and you say, this, you know, we have to either get rid of this or completely change. So anyway, that's what I have to say about it, and I'm thrilled that we've started the process, and I'm thrilled that Knollwood bought into it, and I guess the next project is our neighbor to the north.
Thank you. Great testimony to the history of this. I would add, I am personally convinced that a lot of the numbers and projections are quite conservative, that there are savings for not only the sponsoring communities of Lake Forest and Libertyville, but for the Knollwood and other communities that join up with this over the long run. Any other comments from the audience about this? Please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Dan Rogers. I'm the president of the Rockland Fire Protection District. I'm here tonight to tell all of you what an honor it's been to work with Bob Kiley and Pete Siebert. Without them to continuously put up with meeting after meeting and going through this proposal, and then having quite a large meeting a couple weeks ago where we had fire chiefs and lawyers and city managers from Libertyville, Lake Forest, Libertyville Fire Protection District, and Rockland Fire Protection District to all sit down and literally walk through this IGA line by line and finalize it was really quite amazing. I hope that this is the beginning. I think it's a really unique opportunity. I commend both Pete and Rich Karani for coming up with this idea of bringing Libertyville and Lake Forest together, and Knollwood being, or Rockland Fire Protection District being that catalyst. It is a very hard pill to swallow in the unincorporated area right now. Time will heal this, and the coming together and providing the resources to the two full-time fire departments will in the long term help the life and safety of everybody included. But it is a tough pill to swallow right now. I am anxious, I am excited and encouraged that I was part of this, and I thank you all for putting up with it. I encourage you to vote to accept this. We then have Libertyville Fire Protection District to vote on it, and then the Libertyville Board itself, which I encourage you all to please let them know how important this is, and not to be deterred by what I fear a vocal minority. But thank you all. It's been a journey, but at the end of the tunnel here, I'm telling you, it's going to be really good. And there's more to happen. There's equipment to be consolidated, liquidated. That I think there's some options there to help Lake Forest and to Libertyville with. I think this is really going to be a special project when it's all said and done and the dust settles. So thank you all for your time, and if there's any questions, I'll certainly take them. If not, I'll.
Thank you very much for your leadership on this. When Dan says it's been a journey, I think you said it twice, completely understates it. It's one of the, frankly, braver profiles in civic courage I've ever seen to undertake the resistance to necessary and evident change. And you've really stood the course, and I applaud you, sir.
Rob,
Any questions, please?
Other than, Dan, other than providing extraordinary fire protection service and the medical help ambulance support at our end, and I'm assuming Libertyville will do the same, is there anything else you'd suggest that we do in making this bitter pill a little bit easier to swallow, or do we just play the plan that you all work so hard on, which I guess is the main thing?
Any type of outreach, which I think we've spoken with a little bit, Chief Siebert and Rich and I, to the Knollwood community. There's a lot of misinformation going around, and I'm not quite sure how to handle that you're taking something away from them. What Pete has come up with the POP, the Paid On Premise program, to offer it to the qualified firemen and women of Knollwood, I think is really outstanding. I'm grateful, quite honestly, to that. I know Rich Karani is a little more restricted with Libertyville, with some of their union representation and how that all might work. But the continued interaction and reassurance that this is friends coming together and not a hostile takeover as such. Just to also let you all know, from the very beginning, and I personally did several of the meetings with Lake Bluff, I have always encouraged and said from the beginning, this should be Lake Bluff, Lake Forest, Libertyville, Rockland, all coming together. There's a bottom line goal here, and that's life safety. I understand the emotions of all of this, and Lake Bluff, for those of you who don't know, had the consideration of partnering with Rockland and starting an ambulance service. And on the surface, that sounded very intriguing, and I appreciated their thoughts. As I went around the county and I've attended some continuing ed seminars regarding fire service and reached out to presenters and such, for anybody to get the idea that they're qualified to start an ambulance service from the ground up, I think you need to really reconsider that thought. I've learned a lot from Pete and Rich Karani. That's not something that you want to just decide, let's get in the ambulance service. Lake Forest has provided unbelievable service over the years, as has Libertyville. To bring it together is great. Please do whatever you can toward the unincorporated Knollwood community to reassure them, whether it's even a letter going out or such, that this is a coming together, that there's no one meant to be hurt here, and that the service level is not going to be depleted. That's probably the biggest thing.
That's an interesting idea, Dave.
Mr. Mayor, perhaps I could suggest too that as a council, maybe we extend a huge thank you to the men and women of the Rockland Fire Protection District who have serviced that area so well for so many years and assisted Lake Forest on calls and Lake Bluff on calls and numerous other entities. So I think that as a council, we could express our sincere thanks to those men and women as well.
Thank you so much. And lastly, there's currently a group that is, again, they're not happy with it. I can't stand here and fib to you. They're passing petitions and riling folks up, and it would be nice from Lake Forest and Libertyville's to, again, reassure people that you're not losing your fire department. You're not losing anything. What you're gaining is Lake Forest and Libertyville coming together. And maybe long after I'm gone and the rest of you are as well, the Lake Forest and Libertyville somewhere down the road may end up joining as well to share costs and reduce overhead. That's where I came from with Rockland. The overhead to run a 7/8 of a mile district, just the numbers just don't pan out long term. They just don't. And I am eternally grateful to have Lake Forest and Libertyville on either side to pick that up. My mother still lives there, and I have a family there. To know that this type of professional service is available is truly a godsend. So I thank you all. I thank you for your time tonight. If any one of you have anything to discuss, Mr. Kiley has my contact info. I'm happy to talk to anybody. Again, personally, to Bob Kiley. I've known Bob for over 20 years. When we started this, we sat down and he was just straightforward from word go. What we couldn't do, we couldn't do, but what we could, we did. And I thank you publicly, Bob, for all your help in this. It's been really a joy to work with you on this. So thank you all. Have a great evening. Thank you for allowing me the time.
Good thoughts. Good thoughts. Any other comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll bring this item back and ask for a motion for approval of an intergovernmental agreement and substantially the form attached here too between the Rockland Fire Protection District, the Village of Libertyville, the City of Lake Forest, and the Libertyville Fire Protection District for fire and ambulance service, and to authorize the mayor, city manager, city attorney, and city clerk to proceed with execution of the intergovernmental agreement.
So moved.
Second.
This is a roll call vote.
Can I just ask one clarifying matter, though? I think I pointed this out before. If our council would take a look at paragraph 13.
You are correct, and we will get clarification on that.
Thank you. So we will approve this
Substantially in the form is the motion.
substantially in the form, so you can make that correction. Okay, thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you.
Alderman Beidler.
Aye.
Alderman Morris.
Aye.
Alderman Newman.
Aye.
Alderman Rummel.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack.
Aye.
Alderman Moreno.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
8 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. Next are additional items for discussion and comments.
Can I just ask
Sure.
a favor of the city council to follow up on comments made by Mr. Tack and Mr. Rogers? Could I ask the city council to authorize the city manager to submit a proposal to the Village of Lake Bluff for similar fire and EMS services?
Absolutely.
Need a motion?
Do you need a motion?
Motion?
I would prefer,
Yeah.
So
oh,
moved.
she's saying it's not on the
But the
agenda.
direction's okay.
So
If you give
moved.
me a lot of nods, we'll be okay.
Yes.
Yeah, well, it's a direct follow-on,
Mr. Mayor?
Obvious, it's been obvious for a very long time in all the analyses that frankly, the fire and emergency technician services have provided us that we need to combine to have even better services. So I think this is a fine idea.
Could I just request then that we also follow up on the suggestion that we find a way to reach out, and I would think, Bob, this would be more of a staff issue to figure out how to operationalize that. If there is a way to reach out to residents saying, we look forward to serving you. I mean, he gave us some great language about coming together, not losing anything. I mean, I realize you're not going to write something that says, you're not, the timing may not be quite right, but I hope we at least hold the concept of reaching out and being really positive about this relationship in some way, if we can figure out how to do that.
I think, Alderman, it's a great idea that came up this evening. I will speak with my counterpart in Libertyville.
Good.
And following their action, then I think it will send something out. I know in talking with Mr. Siebert, he was planning to send a personal letter to all personnel in the Rockland, personally inviting them to be considered for a potential paid on-premise position with the city. So I think the more outreach we can do, the better.
I would agree, and I think the residents, just to hear from us that we take this seriously, that we intend to, give them our absolutely highest level of service, which is what we all get. So we'll be sharing that service with them.
Right.
For sure, for sure.
Okay.
Good. Next item is discussion and comments by council members with regard to the principles, conduct, and procedures for meetings and activities of the Lake Forest City Council and staff. And if deemed appropriate by council, we could adopt these tonight. But let me start with our subcommittee team of Alderman Morris and Preschlack. So, Jeff, take it away.
Sure. Good evening again, everyone. I want to thank the aldermen and the city staff and our city attorney for their input into our principles document. We've been working on this document for many months. Alderman Preschlack and I believe that we've incorporated the key comments from the council into the document. We recommend that this evening our document receive council approval. But before doing that, I was going to ask Alderman Preschlack for his comments, and then we'll open up for additional comments from other aldermen with respect to the document. So, Alderman Preschlack.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to echo the thanks to the aldermen and to Susan Banks, who took care of all the edits and the revisions and the incorporations of emails and handwritten notes from all the aldermen, and also the workshops that we had to try to get to the goal line here. I think we're close to the goal line. I think part of our process was to be transparent about input and incorporation of changes. The big picture is this document is really about trying to orient an alderman either a new one like myself or an existing alderman every year to figure out what it is that our roles and responsibilities are to anchor us into how we should effectuate our duties. And so it's not a legal document. It does cover some legal subjects, and so it's really to be viewed as guiding principles. And so I know we've asked everybody if they have any more final input, and I think Alderman Bushman had one topic he wanted to raise. And so in the spirit of just having transparency and input right before the goal line, we just wanted to pass it along to Alderman Bushman.
Before we fall over the goal.
Thank you, Alderman Preschlack. As the council recalls, the one provision that maybe gave us the most trouble when we were working through the document, and one that even our last workshop, we didn't come up with the verbiage, but asked our aldermen who have done a great job on this document, Alderman Morris and Alderman Preschlack, to come up with some language on what we call our ex parte contact provision. And I appreciate the effort they've done. I did come back with some comments using their language, but felt that we should be clear. I was afraid that maybe we had too much ambiguity in the language that was being proposed, and suggested that we maybe focus it more on the intent behind ex parte contacts and the fact that they should not be had. And that's one, to try and assure we have a fair hearing and a recognition of due process by petitioners. And also the recognition that this ex parte concept really comes up in the adjudicatory type of proceedings. Certainly from a legal profession, it's well known by all the judges, by all the administrative judges, ALJs, by arbitrators. It's a concept that they recognize and need to comply with. But it's a concept that maybe is a little foreign when you look at our role as legislators, as policymakers. And I was hoping we can maybe get the language a little sharper, a little clearer, that those are the intentions. Now, I did have the opportunity of, again, working with the committee, and in turn, the consensus was we'll bring it to the full council for discussion, deliberation, and the specific wording was shared, I believe, with all the councilmen, both the original committee work and the modifications to that I had submitted, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or entertain any further discussion that the council would like.
I would just respond. We've talked about this for a while now. My reaction was that I like the wording the way it is because I think it's more expansive. It's not included to prevent conversations, but to make sure that we're all aware of what the conversations are that we're having. So that's why I feel comfortable with the language we have currently. So
I have to say, when I read this new version, it was clear as mud to me what we were trying to do. I'm not sure when I'm supposed to do this. Can I speak with my constituents? This is a very important provision, and that's why when I did the original revisions to that document, which you both know were probably the most extensive that you received from anyone, I suggested that our city attorney take a look at this specific provision because it does get into issues of due process and protecting the rights of petitioners. And I think it is a very technical provision that we all need to understand and comply with. Now, I'm not in favor of using legal verbiage that is, beyond the our day-to-day understanding of things, but I do think we could do a better job. This is too broad the way it is, and I really would like to give our city attorney an opportunity to make this more specific, because if we violate this provision and violate someone's due process, they are going to talk about adjudicatory proceedings, and they are going to talk about some very specific things that we did that were improper. And I want to know what those guidelines are so that I can proceed ahead. And so I would really like a better definition of what we can and can't do in terms of ex parte contacts. I like precise words. I like precise wording. Legal words have legal meaning and they're there for a reason. And so I like the rest of this document, but I really would like to take another look at this provision and see if we can refine it further.
Maybe the city attorney, I know that our city attorney has had input into the document. Perhaps you want to comment?
After our last meeting, when we had the workshop meeting to talk about this, I came up with the language based on what seemed to be the majority of the discussion, which was keep it somewhat, I wouldn't say vague is the wrong word, but keep it somewhat general. Not so specific that it would only apply in certain circumstances, but it was a more general, not a prohibition, but a discouragement and a reporting. And that was the direction that I got, at least from listening to everybody's points on this. And so the language that's presented is that kind of consensus language to keep it a little more general and not have a strict prohibition on contact, but have a discouragement where it might create some question of impartiality or bias.
It seems to me this whole clause started sort of a general, guidance or caution about inappropriate contacts, and as the city, since we vote on things as the city, as a member of council in this case, or other boards and commissions, as you receive entreaties from citizens who want to do things, how you're supposed to handle that. But I think once the phrase ex parte got launched, Black's Law Dictionary got into this, and it's a big deal. And we do have big deal situations. For example, issues that require a public hearing, certain actions that we take with respect to zoning board and revising the comprehensive plan and that sort of thing, where the matters of due process and fairness and things go on the record about who did what and when and who said what, that maybe we almost need to divide this into two pieces, because I think, and maybe, but I'm out of my depth quickly, as you can tell, so I leave it to the city attorney, but maybe there's, for the more serious stuff, ex parte and whatnot, just what that is, and we got to be careful about it. But then I think there is this broader issue of being fair with people and so forth, and that when you're ultimately going to make a decision, no, you really shouldn't take sides with the public that are part of a petition to the council and so forth. You make the decision at the latest best moment, when all the evidence is in and the process has run its course. So that's my 2 cents. Alderman Newman.
I've run across these kinds of instances before, and with all due respect to Alderman Morris and Alderman Preschlack, I don't think you could ever write the perfect definition of ex parte. And I think we get caught into the situation of trying to make it perfect. There will never be a standard ex parte contact. They're all going to be different. Everybody's going to have a different interest, and I don't think we can fit that within a simple paragraph and override common sense. I think we all have a pretty good idea. I think Prue made that statement a few meetings ago that basically I'm not comfortable listening to whatever you have to say because it hasn't gone through the full process. Let me defer from further discussion with you. If you sense at all that somebody is coming at you with a vested interest. So I just think it's really very, very difficult to write something that's all-encompassing. Many have tried, few have succeeded.
Mr. Mayor, though, could I just make the note, this is not my area of expertise, and I have to admit that, given the two lawyers who are on city council, I do defer to them, although I know sometimes they're going to use words I don't actually know or understand. But it looks to me about my sixth or seventh reading of this today, it seems to me that what we've been asked to approve looks at things from the point of view of the of the city, and the suggestion from Alderman Bushman and that first sentence gives rise to claims of denial of due process and the right to a fair hearing actually takes the point of view of the resident or the petitioner, which I actually like including where possible, and I don't think that suggests that, I mean, due process is pretty significant. I'm wondering, just as a possibility of including that and then not having to do the adjudicatory. See, I can't even say it, much less understand it.
It's your first language,
Adjudicatory.
right? English
Yeah,
is your
well, I know it's
You have to
English, but
respect-
legalese is not my first language. But I feel like the denial of due process could give rise to claims of the denial of due process and the right to a fair hearing, which I think is what you included, Ray. That's pretty straightforward. I mean, I think as an alderman and as a city council member and as a resident, that would seem like something appropriate to have in the document. So I'm wondering if we can, kind of make that change and not lose anything. And I think gain something. Actually, where I'm going with this is I think that gains us something by bringing the resident and the resident's point of view as the thing we have to think about, although not indicating any bias. I don't know.
We need a proposal of something here.
I think we could table it.
More time?
I think we got to send it back to the city attorney.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
can table it.
she's heard us.
We'll
That's a good
rethink
idea.
it. And it's a difficult subject, which is everybody's acknowledged. I like the idea of being able to disclose these conversations so we all know what's happening. To the
I
point
wouldn't
of
change that.
earlier,
You
Mrs.
keep
Desmond talked about transparency. That's important. So,
I'm
I'll
a
take it
huge
back.
fan of not reinventing the wheels, and since Alderman Newman has identified this as an issue older than dirt, have we really researched what other communities have come up with on this?
Yeah, so that's how we started it.
You
I
know,
mean, so Bob pulled together
best-in-class
a
things.
lot of documents from Highland Park and other areas, and then actually Jed scoured some other city governments. So there was a huge collection on this, but the big issue is you can't legislate common sense. We're never going to have do's and don'ts,
Right.
and don't do this and don't do that. So we really, this document is to orient us to what our roles and responsibilities are as aldermen, and you know when you're compromised. And nobody's ever going to find out, but we have to look in the mirror and understand that. So I think there's a real balance here. If it goes back to the committee, and the lawyers get it, so to speak, you're gonna have language that we don't understand that is gonna go too far away from common sense. And so I really caution us to get into, let's figure out what I can and can't do
Right,
and
but-
create
but-
less.
Jim, I'd like to say, that's not what I meant by sending it back to the city attorney. I think there's 13, 14 pages here. There's a total absence of legalese. Okay, there's a total, this is it's like everyday language, which is designed to instruct new aldermen and occasionally us when we go back there and go, oops, maybe I shouldn't have done that. So I would ask the city attorney not to get overly legal with us, but to just address this in everyday, common, ordinary language, typical of the, I'll say, the culture of the rest of the
Right, at the bottom of page 185, the last paragraph says, "This document is intended to serve as a set of guiding principles and recommended procedures." That's not legalese. I mean, that's just kind of
right
framing it out.
These are
right?
guiding principles. I was kind of okay with this. I understand what you guys are saying. I was kind of okay with this because to me that was a guiding principle. And I don't want to make it too tough because as somebody said, you cannot identify every single issue here. You have to have a broad brush approach to this in common sense language so that it's clearly understandable. But they're guiding principles. This is not a you can do this, you can't do that, and blah 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 blah.
Right, what I was going to say is I think there are other ways of saying adjudicatory without using that word. You know, and I'm sure Julie can
But you used it.
think of that.
I would like to be able to spell every word that's in here, for instance.
And I'm sure that our city attorney can come up with that. I think this goes back to that very early conversation when I was first on the council we had with Vic Filippini, who was trying to describe when we act as a legislative body versus the hearing body on and that's what it's all going back to. And I think we have sort of a basic understanding of those different roles. I'm also interested as to just our new city attorney's take on those different roles. And so I'd like it from that input perspective as
Mr.
well.
Mayor, can I sort of interject here for a moment?
Please.
Because, and maybe it's because I'm coming to the end of my career here, but in deference to Susan Banks, do not send this back to committee. It is now time for the city council to vote it up or vote it down. As someone said, it's like chewing on the marshmallow. You know, if Alderman Beidler has put a proposal on the table, the council, and same with Alderman Bushin has put a proposal on the table. Vote the proposals up or down, but what I'm hearing is that 99% of this is fine. And I think, as it's been articulated by Alderman Newman, you're never going to have a perfect document. A year from now, the new council is going to make new changes to this document.
Make another decision.
Exactly right.
Right.
And so I think it's time to just move forward, take action, and you can, you know, this is not set in stone that you're never going to be able to change this. You're going to revisit this in, quite frankly, less than 6 months.
Right.
And
It's a living
so I'm
document.
just imploring you, please don't send this back to staff, because all you're doing is kicking the
27 years,
can down the
you're
road.
entitled to it.
So,
I would like to share some quick comments. First of all, I think it's very important that all of us, and we know this, decisions have an option value. And you don't make a decision until you have to Tim's earlier comment. That's absolutely the way I see our role. When we are asked by a resident to discuss something that is not ready for public discussion, I go into listening mode. I listen, I don't talk. And that's how I protect my job and my role, but I allow the resident to talk because they want to talk to us. So I think, I don't know how to capture that legally, I am not a lawyer, but that's the way I think about this. Talking is,
But even listening is a passive acceptance
no,
of.
that's not true. I'm not accepting anything, I'm simply receiving communication.
You're being
Well, it's a
informed.
passive
You're learning.
engagement in the other person's eyes. I'm not comfortable with that.
I'm okay with Bob's suggestion.
Yes, I am too.
Although one more comment on that, yeah, we should keep in mind that in our mission statement, which is a very short one-sentence, non-legal document, it does say that we are to promote citizen involvement besides seeking their trust and respect. And that I value very highly as our mission statement. And I just want to make sure that something we come up with this protocol, with this guidance, with this non-binding type of wording doesn't undermine that principle of civic involvement, which to me is people being able to reach out and talk to and communicate with their legislative representatives, particularly when you're talking about our role as policymakers and our role as legislators. And again, that's a concept I think we shouldn't
Well,
lose sight of either.
I think there's maybe two proposals. One, we could vote to approve everything except 6B, I guess, ex parte, and work on it some more, or approve the entire thing, realizing that it is a living document, and we'll come back to it in time.
I'm in favor of the latter.
Is that a
What's that,
motion?
the whole document?
I would like to make a motion to approve the document in its entirety.
Yeah.
Me too.
Is that a second?
Yes.
Are we roll calling this kind of thing?
I think you should.
Yeah.
I think it'll be easier to keep track.
Mr. Mayor, are you going to take public comment on this? I don't know if you are or not, but.
Yes. Is there comments from the public? Please, from the podium, so we can all hear.
That's my point, exactly, Mr. Mayor. My name is Rami Lopat. I live at 410 East Woodland Road, and I can't tell you how many times I've been in the city council chamber and had mayors come up to me to apologize because they forgot about the public comment.
You're welcome.
It's a very disturbing. This, I've lived here for 20 years. It's happened more than two hands. So, before I even begin with my larger point, ex parte, one of my favorite things. I get very upset when I hear the word discouragement from the city attorney. I can't think, if you're talking about public relations, discouragement is the last word you want to use. I had one day at the grocery store, I went up to a historic preservation commissioner and I asked him, "What time is the meeting tonight?" And he just about jumped out of his skin. And he said, "Rami, you know I can't talk to you. That's an ex parte conversation. I will have to disclose it." True story. It wasn't you.
No, I talk to Rami a lot, and I think.
So, whatever you decide for yourselves is going to be interpreted by many boards and commissions. So be careful with your words and how you teach people the rules of your road, because we don't want to discourage public participation. Next. This document uses words like respect and dignity, and I think dot point 3 didn't have a chance to read this today, mentions being replied to by city government. Well, you know what? I saw this on your agenda just tonight about 5 o'clock. I thought, wait a minute, I commented on this a long time ago. I read this document. Yeah, I did. Here it is. May 21st, to 22 recipients, all of you. Attached are my comments on the parameters and procedures to be discussed tonight. I am unsure whether I can attend. I received them today, and the electricity is off on Woodland Road, so I am at the library emailing these to you. I wrote 3 pages, single-spaced, of comments on that document. I'm sorry I'm so upset, but I'm upset about you. I got one response. Anybody want to take a guess? From my alderman, Alderman Morris. Thank you, Jen. Thanks for your comments. I appreciate your thoughts on this effort. Then I got responses from the 13 other people. And then I said, thank you, Alderman, for acknowledging receipt. Because I find that when I send things, for example, to you, Mr. Mayor, I have never gotten an acknowledgement. And yesterday, I happened to be going through an email thread and saw that I was not alone, that other people have had the same problem. And my email to Mr. Morris said, how do I find out if it was read or included or will be in the final edits? And he wrote back, on May 28th, which I believe was your workshop day. I believe that once we complete a draft, it will be available for public comments before final adoption. This is a new process for me, so if that changes, I will let you know. Well, guess what? I didn't hear anything back. And now it's in front of you, and no one is saying, let's try this out on the public. What does the public think about our rules? You want the city attorney to look at it. Why don't you ask us to look at it and say how responsive you are being to us, both in these council chambers and outside of the council chambers? I think that there is more to be discussed here, and certainly there is more.
Please, we do talk to a lot of people about a lot of different subjects.
Well,
and the materials of these materials, principles, conduct, and procedures for meetings and activities of Lake Forest City Council and staff have been in any number of council packets going back, I don't know, since we started talking about this.
Well, I was
So there's
right
plenty of
there.
opportunity for people to comment. And
Yes.
You know, the fact that word for word comments are not taken in is not indicates that it's not read. I'm sure everyone
I
read it.
imagine that one of my points might have been good. Just one in 3 pages could have had an acknowledgement. Really?
Oh, but I
Okay,
can
we
tell
move
you
on?
that I went through this document with your comments next to me.
How would I know, Alderman?
Well, I believe I did respond to you at one point.
I don't think so.
Actually, Rami, you sent them that night. I can remember the workshop meeting we were at, and Jed and I were sitting next to each other, and I said, I don't know how quickly we can read this. In fact, I'm not sure he'd had a chance to look at it, and we glanced at it, and there were definitely, I can't quite remember what specifically there were, but there were a couple that we brought up that night, and I think then incorporated later, especially since he was doing it. I can't remember, and I apologize for not replying. You write a lot of emails. I'm not saying that,
Exactly.
and I apologize
And each
for
one
not
deserves,
No,
we
it
got
is.
your
We
email.
love that you're committed to the community. I don't get me wrong. It is, let me just say, we get a lot, one of our responsibilities is to respond to all the emails and try to acknowledge them. And sometimes, I'm gonna admit it, as a volunteer, I am overwhelmed by that. I do the best I can, but I am not, I apologize. I will admit that I do not actually always acknowledge. If somebody says to me, I have a problem I'm hoping you can help me solve, that I'm pretty much going to respond to. If somebody insults me, I'm less likely to get engaged in that. In fact, I probably won't respond at all. If somebody tells me they think I've made the worst decision they've ever imagined and how could I have been so stupid, pretty much not going to respond. If you need my help and there's something timely, I will absolutely respond, but I don't necessarily, and maybe this is something we should have better guidance on, I don't necessarily acknowledge every time somebody writes to me. Now, maybe I should, and if my fellow aldermen, I'm in my 5th year, I am not too far gone to learn. Jed and I will often agree that one of us takes the lead and one of us responds so we don't trip on each other in getting response. I assume other aldermen do the same thing. We do this the best we can. We are aldermen. It turns out that this job is not just to phone it in. You really have to get engaged. There's a lot of preparation and a lot that we do, and we don't get it all right. So if you feel like there's things that we need to improve on, I'm sure we're glad to hear them, especially from somebody as engaged and committed to this community as you are.
I think I'm arguably the civilian in this crowd that has, over the years, talked more about transparency and community relations than anybody else.
Well, thank you. Listen.
So
the evening
I
is
would love to
long,
have a role in that.
And we have a motion
Thank you.
to approve
Sounds like I'm being
principles, conduct, and procedures for meetings and activities of the Lake Forest City Council and staff as presented. This is a roll call vote. Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Beidler.
Aye.
Alderman Morris.
Aye.
Alderman Newman.
Aye.
Alderman Rummel.
Nay.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack.
Aye.
Alderman Moreno.
Nay.
Alderman Bushman.
Nay.
5 yea,
Activists.
3 nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Can I just say, we're coming back to this again in 6 months as
I mean, it's a
city
living
manager.
It's a living document.
It's a living
It's really too
document,
bad.
and I'll be happy to talk to anybody about how we might want to change
Together.
it in the future.
And thank you for your understanding, Alderman.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it's all good points, all good points. One last thing before we adjourn. Just some words. Tonight, the city council once again has completed important policy actions and deliberations essential to sustaining Lake Forest as one of the finest communities in America. This work, building on the conversation we've just had, this work only occurs through the generous commitment of time, intellect, and informed fair-mindedness of citizen, volunteer aldermen and women, the many members of Lake Forest boards and commissions, and nevertheless, the dedication of a highly qualified and talented city staff and its senior leadership. All this said, there are also personal costs associated with citizen volunteering on behalf of the city. In my case, the time pressures of running an expanding financial services firm, heading an enterprising family, and being an available grandparent, combined with being mayor, exceed my expectations of 18 months ago. The work of mayor I have found to be exactly what I thought it would be. However, the other facets of my life have grown and evolved more than expected, such that at an entirely personal level, I am neither comfortable nor satisfied with the time I have available to devote to all of these priorities. Therefore, after long and thoughtful consideration, I have decided not to pursue a second term as mayor. I have apprised the senior leadership of the Lake Forest Caucus of this decision, and they will begin the mayoral nomination process this month. I will assist the caucus in any way they ask of me. I look forward to continuing to execute the office of Mayor of Lake Forest with the able support and assistance of this council and city staff through May the 6th, 2019. I continue to enjoy working with City Council and interacting with so many caring, thoughtful residents. It has truly been an honor to serve our residents as the Mayor of Lake Forest, and I will forever be grateful for this opportunity. May I have a motion to adjourn this council for the evening?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
You run.
You can't tell a guy?